Okay, so have you ever heard of a case where a family almost lost their beachfront property in the Philippines?
Not really.
Well, get this. 30 years after they thought they bought it, another family pops up waving a Torrens title. Like, nope, this land is ours. Crazy, right?
Wow, that does sound wild. So what happened?
That's what we're going to find out today. We're deep diving into Heirs of Angel Yadao versus Heirs of Juan Caletina. Can a handwritten contract from the 60s beat out a registered title?
Ooh, now that's a good question. A registered Torrens title is usually seen as the gold standard for land ownership in the Philippines. So this is going to be interesting.
Okay, let's set the stage here. We've got two families, right? The Yadaos and the Calatinas both claiming they own this prime beachfront property. The Calatinas are all about their registered Torrens title, which, like you said, is typically rock-solid proof of ownership.
Yeah, the Torrens system was put in place in the Philippines to make land ownership crystal clear and cut down on disputes.
Makes sense. But here's the thing. The Yadaos have their own set of documents. A handwritten contrata, that's a contract in Ilocano, and a notarized deed of absolute sale, both from 1962. They say these papers prove they bought the land way back then.
So why did the Calatinas wait until 1993 to file their lawsuit? That's more than 30 years.
Yeah, that's a big question, right? And that's where this legal concept of extinctive prescription comes in. Basically, it acts like a time limit for legal claims.
So even if you've got a legal right, if you sit on it for too long, you could lose it. That's a bit nerve-wracking.
You got it. Imagine you loaned someone money ages ago but never tried to collect it. After a certain time, the law might say, too late, you snooze, you lose. It's similar with land ownership.
I see. So what happened with the lower courts? Did they side with the Calatinas and that Torrens title?
They did. The lower courts put a ton of emphasis on the strength of that Torrens title and weren't so sure about the Yadao's documents. The original contract wasn't notarized, and the deed of sale wasn't registered. Big red flags under Philippine law.
So at that point, it seemed pretty open and shut, right? But then it goes to the Supreme Court and, well, things take a turn.
They do. The Supreme Court went way beyond just looking at the papers. They dug into the history of the sale, contract law, and of course that extinctive prescription idea. And here's the kicker. The Calatina's 30-year delay became a major factor in the Supreme Court's decision.
No way. So their waiting actually hurt their case. That's crazy.
Yeah, talk about a plot twist. It shows you can't just assume you're safe, even with something as powerful as a Torrens title.
Absolutely. It highlights how important it is to act quickly when you're dealing with legal matters, especially property.
For sure. But hold on, there's one more piece to this puzzle. Dolores Calatina, the respondent's mother, gave testimony and actually admitted they had sold the land to the Yadaos, even though they were now trying to say that sale didn't count.
Wait, what? Her own family was arguing against that sale.
I know, right? It's
Yeah.
like she threw a wrench into their whole argument.
Wow, that's wild. So we have a registered Torrens title on one side and a bunch of old contracts, plus this bombshell witness statement on the other. What did the Supreme Court do?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The Supreme Court actually sided with the Yadaos. They overturned the lower court's decisions, and they had some really interesting reasons for it. First, they said, even though that initial contrata wasn't notarized, it was still a valid deal between the two sides.
So they're saying that a missing notarization isn't always a deal breaker.
Exactly. They focused on the intent of the agreement rather than getting caught up in a technicality. Plus, you've got Dolores's admission, right? The court documents show she was married to Hospicio Caletina Sr., one of Juan Caletina's sons.
And Hospicio was one of the people who signed that original contract selling the land to the Yadaos.
Exactly. Her statement completely contradicted her family's legal arguments.
It makes you wonder about the family dynamics, right? Like,
Yeah.
what was happening behind the scenes that led her to say that?
I know, right? We might never know the full story, but it definitely adds to the intrigue. But the Supreme Court stuck to the legal arguments. They also pointed out that the title was handed over to the Yadaos after that sale, and that the Yadaos had lived on and used the land for 31 years without any issues.
Hold on, so the Calatinas knew the Yadaos had the title and were living on the property for over 3 decades.
Yep, they knew and didn't do anything about it. The Supreme Court saw that as a sign that the Yadaos were acting like the true owners, which, backs up their whole claim.
Wow, so it sounds like the Supreme Court was looking at the bigger picture, the actions of both families, not just the paperwork.
Exactly. It's a great example of how the legal process considers the reality of the situation, how people actually behaved over time.
This is already so fascinating. So what's the bottom line for our listeners? Does this mean a Torrens title isn't as strong as people think?
This case definitely shows that even a Torrens title, which is generally very powerful, isn't totally unbeatable.
And what about that extinctive prescription? What's the key takeaway there?
It's a big lesson, for sure. If you're dealing with property and you think you have a claim, you got to act fast. Don't wait around or you might lose your chance to fight for what you believe is yours.
I'm hooked already. This case has so many layers.
I know, right? We're just getting started. There's more to this story. We're diving deeper into it in part 2.
I can't wait. We'll be back in a moment.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're knee-deep in this Philippine property case, remember? An old handwritten contract going up against a Torrens title.
It's wild, right? This case really throws a wrench into the idea that a Torrens title is the ultimate proof of ownership.
Totally. And as promised, we're about to add another layer of drama to this whole thing. Family drama.
Oh, yeah. This case has got it all.
So fill us in. Who are the main characters in this family saga?
Okay, it all starts with Juan Caletina, the guy whose name is on that Torrens title. Turns out his personal life was a bit, shall we say, complicated.
Uh-oh, I sense a story coming.
You got it. Juan had relationships with multiple women and fathered kids with different partners. Yeah, it gets messy. And all these kids from different relationships could potentially claim that beachfront property. The court documents tell us that Juan was first married to a woman named Nicetas Galaran, but they split up. Then he got involved with Casiana Dallo. Remember her?
Wait, Casiana? She's the one who signed that notarized deed of absolute sale with the Yadaos back in '62.
That's her, but get this, there's no proof Juan and Casiana ever actually got married. So her right to sell that land is, well, kind of shaky.
Whoa, I can see how this is going to get even more complicated. So Juan had children with other women too, right?
He did, with both Nicetas and another woman even before his first marriage. So you've got a mix of legitimate and illegitimate children, all potentially wanting a piece of that property.
This is sounding like a soap opera.
Right. And this crazy family history actually plays a big part in the legal arguments. Remember how the Caletinas were trying to say that sale to the Yadaos was bogus?
Yeah.
Well, their argument was that Casiana had no right to sell the land because she wasn't legally Juan's wife.
They were all about that Torrens title, with only Juan's name on it. But the Supreme Court wasn't convinced.
Nope, they saw through it. The court pointed out that even though Juan's name was the only one on the title, Casiana was mentioned. It described Juan as being married to her.
Interesting. So their relationship was acknowledged on the title, even if it wasn't a legal marriage. But what about Dolores Caletina's testimony? She's the one who admitted the sale, even though her family was contesting it. She was married to Hospicio Caletina Sr., one of Juan's sons, and he was one of the guys who signed that original contract.
You're right. It's almost like she accidentally torpedoed her own family's case.
I know, it's wild. Makes you wonder what was really going on there. Was it a genuine memory slip, or was there some family tension at play?
It's possible. These kinds of land disputes can bring up all sorts of buried conflicts and resentment.
For sure. It reminds us that the law isn't just some abstract thing. It's about people, emotions, and, yeah, sometimes even grudges. And in this case, those family dynamics added a whole other level of intrigue to the legal battle over this property.
Totally agree. It makes you think about the influence of history, relationships, and how they can all impact a legal case.
This case is already a roller coaster. What else can we expect?
Stick around for the final part of our deep dive. We'll explore what the Supreme Court's decision means and how it might impact similar cases in the future.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been untangling this crazy beachfront property case in the Philippines. You know, the one with the handwritten contract versus the Torrens title.
Oh, yeah, the one with all the family drama.
That's the one. So the Supreme Court ended up siding with the Yadaos, the family with those old contracts. What are the big takeaways from their ruling?
Well, one thing that really stands out is that this case shows that the Torrens system in the Philippines, while super important, isn't foolproof.
So it's not always an automatic win, even if you've got that registered title.
Exactly. The court basically said other evidence matters too, things like witness statements, who's been living on the land, the whole story behind the deal.
And what about that extinctive prescription thing? How did that play into the Supreme Court's decision?
Oh, that was huge. The Caletinas waited over 30 years to make their claim, remember? And that hurt them big time. The court was basically like, you snoozed, you lose. They had all that time to act, and they didn't.
So what's the lesson here for our listeners? If they're in the Philippines and think they have a claim to some property, what should they do?
Don't wait. Seriously, if you think you have a right to a piece of land, Talk to a lawyer and get the ball rolling. The longer you wait, the harder it might be to prove your case.
It really drives home the point that it's not just about having the right documents, it's about taking action too.
Absolutely. And this case, man, it's just fascinating. Law, history, human nature, it's all mixed up together.
It really makes you think about how we decide what's fair, especially in property disputes.
Right. And this whole thing started with what seemed like a straightforward question. Can a handwritten contract beat a Torrens title? But as we've seen, the answer is way more complicated than that.
Oh, yeah. We had family secrets, surprising admissions, and a legal system that's trying to balance technicalities with real-life situations. It's been quite the journey.
It's a reminder that law is about real people, with their relationships and their histories. It's not just rules on a page.
Absolutely. And we always love to hear from our listeners, so tell us what you think. Did the Supreme Court get it right? Did they find the right balance? Let us know in the comments.
And if you're hungry for more deep dives into fascinating legal cases, make sure you like and subscribe to The Deep Dive. We'll be back with another episode soon.